Welcome to Books for Success. Today, we're delving into the wisdom within Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Siddhartha is the beloved classic novel about a pampered prince who goes on a spiritual journey of self-discovery. Through the depths of asceticism to the heights of worldly success, the novel traces one seeker's path to enlightenment, taking the road less traveled. Who's it for? Seekers curious about this classic text. Pathfinders and waymakers looking for stories of kindred souls. Anyone interested in alternative visions for society, religion, success, and relationships. Before we begin, subscribe and ring the bell for notifications if you want to keep receiving the knowledge of book summaries about health, wealth, love, psychology, and much more. Don't be shy about dropping your book suggestions for us to summarize. Also, you can use this video as an audiobook summary. Let's grow and succeed together. What's in it for me? Uncover the subtle beauty of a story that has inspired generations. Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. There are few novels that have inspired as much devotion and debate as Siddhartha. The tale of a seeker on the path to enlightenment who lived at the time of Gautama Buddha. From privileged child to disciplined ascetic, from rich merchant to humble ferryman, his story inspired generations to look inward to find the path to wisdom. How remarkable that it was first published in 1922 between two of the most devastating wars of the last century by a novelist best known for his critique of religion, education, and capitalism. So come along on a journey that leads where no one can guide and discover its subtle, profound beauty along the way. A journey begins. The beautiful son of a respected Brahmin, Siddhartha grew up beloved by all. A journey begins. His father admired his intelligence and eagerness to learn and imagined him growing into a wise priest. His mother cherished the grace and beauty of her son, and her heart leapt each time he greeted her. She saw his future in the love-struck gazes of young women who noticed Siddhartha's maturing beauty and physical grace. Best friend Govinda grew alongside Siddhartha in these beautiful surroundings, admiring his friend immensely. Govinda loved Siddhartha's thoughts, his lofty spirit, and his powerful, unbending will. Govinda saw in his friend someone worthy, full of integrity. He decided, still just a boy, that wherever his friend might lead in life, Govinda would willingly follow. Yet, Siddhartha felt none of this admiration for himself. The daily rituals of prayers and offerings to the gods felt hollow. Empty motions repeated by empty souls. His reading of the sacred texts felt similarly dull. None could help him understand how to get closer to the Atman, the innermost source of true wisdom. This absence nourished a growing frustration and discontent in the young Brahmin, as his thirst for first-hand knowledge was met with endless ritual and tradition. But a group of samanas, wandering ascetics, passed through his village one day. These holy men had left behind all earthly possessions to dwell in meditation and self-denial. Encouraged by what he saw, Siddhartha made up his mind to leave his family, his home, and all he had ever known to join them. On the eve of his departure, the young Siddhartha had to get his father's permission to leave, which he only won through an epic standoff of wills. Released from familial obligations, Siddhartha and Govinda leave to join the wandering samanas. In the forest, the two learn to overcome hunger, thirst, and pain. Garbed in simple loincloths, sleeping in the open air, and begging for their food, Siddhartha and Govinda meditate until they transcend the physical, annihilate their hunger and fatigue, and even experience death. But with his eyes always open, Siddhartha's discontent grows. These holy men, these samanas, have mastered control over the physical. But just like Siddhartha, they are no closer to wisdom. He confides in Govinda this desire to leave this path, finding it too empty. Then, news of another teacher, an enlightened one, reaches the two friends in the forest. Once again, they leave everything behind to seek wisdom from this new source. The opening chapters paint a vivid picture of the young Siddhartha, his family, and his privileged upbringing. Everything in his character, his physical grace and intelligence, mark him for greatness. Beloved by all, a bright future is laid out for him. But Siddhartha was, from his earliest memories, in search of something else. He could feel the essence of the divine within him, yet all the religious observance, teachings, and practices were bringing him no closer to it. Even worse, he saw successful Brahmins around him as greedy, ignorant, and corrupt. No one, it would seem, could teach the young man. In this way, the novel sets up a broader parable. The author carefully draws a portrait of the emptiness of religion, education, and tradition for seekers of wisdom. Through Siddhartha's eyes, we see that the suffering of the world is caused by a lack of integrity, be it priests in the temple or merchants in the marketplace. Siddhartha beholds a world that appears cut off from the divine. At that moment, he encounters the traveling holy men, who seem to have found a way through extreme deprivation. Yet, still, conquering the body has brought them no closer. Living in self-denial teaches him many esoteric skills, but doesn't quench the thirst of his spirit. It is the lack of wisdom of his teachers that drives him once again to leave everything behind. The fork in the road. The fork in the road. Leaving the bewildered and angry Samanas, Govinda and Siddhartha set off to find the new teacher, the one already winning followers by the thousands. Finding him outside of town in a lush grove, Siddhartha spots Gautama easily in the crowd. A simple man in a yellow robe, it seemed to Siddhartha that this man exemplified his teachings in every glance, every step, every gesture of his fingers, and in the perfection of his calm. But, though Siddhartha finds him captivating to observe, he is less eager to hear his teachings. Already resolved that any teaching that can be spoken cannot be a real teaching, Siddhartha listens with a heart unmoved by Gautama's words. But Govinda is enrapt and vows to follow Gautama as a monk. Govinda is in despair because Siddhartha has chosen a different path. Leaving his friend in the trusted hands of Gautama's followers, Siddhartha seeks out the Buddha to bid the holy man farewell instead. Walking away, Siddhartha experiences his first awakening. Smelling the trees, feeling the sunshine, and seeing the beauty of nature around him, Siddhartha is struck by a realization. For years, he had tried to find wisdom by killing the senses through meditation, hunger, and pain. His error was thinking that the voice of the divine was somehow hindered by the body, when all of nature around him sang and declared that Atman, the spark of the divine, was everywhere. Now, aware that he had not really lived or even loved and yet was trying to conquer the flesh, he felt silly. Encountering an old ferryman by the river, Siddhartha tells him of his plan to go to the city and embrace life. On the way, Siddhartha approaches a lush private grove through which a beautiful courtesan is being carried on a litter. Greeted by the beautiful Kamala with a smile on his face, he vows to come back one day soon in fine clothes, fully groomed, and with gifts for her if she would consider teaching him the ways of love. Slowly, Siddhartha builds a city life, apprentice to a successful merchant and lover to the charming Kamala. His ability to listen and cherish people as they are makes him popular. His discipline helps him succeed in business. His beauty and charm make him beloved of Kamala and admired by men. But his indulgence in the pleasures of the flesh, in wine and gambling and fine living, begin to erode his character. As the tale deepens, Siddhartha's journey explores several new directions. First, encountering the limitations of deprivation and denial of the flesh, he finds no connection to true wisdom in this path or from his samana teachers. Leaving to seek the enlightened one, for Siddhartha, even this holds little promise. Understanding that wisdom can only be gained through lived experience, Siddhartha sets out to live and gain as much experience with the world as he can. Again, the author is drawing out powerful metaphors about the limits of teachable knowledge and the power of experience. Devout followers of religion might spend a lifetime in the most extreme deprivation or denial of the flesh, but they will still not experience enlightenment for themselves. Even following the most perfect teachings, like those of the Buddha, cannot carve an individual's path to wisdom. By embracing the world, at first, Siddhartha finds success and pleasure in his pursuits. Slowly, however, they loosen his samana discipline, soften his thinking, and fatten his belly. Worldly wealth has given him his heart's desire, countless pleasures, and the admiration of many. But it also dulled his senses, muddled his thinking, and brought him even further away from his goal, enlightenment. Thus, the author, too, has drawn the limits of worldly success or romantic love to bring meaning and value to life. In Siddhartha's struggles to find peace on his own terms, he has embraced many paths, played many parts, won and lost in business and at the gambling table, and watched his soul grow heavy and weak in the process. A dead end, a new beginning. A dead end, a new beginning. Realizing his life as a merchant had seen him growing fat and dull, his lovemaking with Kamala now feels like death itself. His rich food and wine have crushed his inner fire, and the once moral and upright Samana has become a shadow. Believing he has killed his spark of divinity, Siddhartha is disgusted with himself. Once again, he flees this comfortable life with no more than the clothes on his back. Driven by despair, he finds himself once again at the river he'd crossed with the humble ferryman decades ago. Siddhartha now stares into the river's waters and doesn't recognize himself. Old and fat, his eyes are hollow, empty. Wishing no more than to let himself drown, he perches on the water's edge, listening. As it did decades before, the river filled Siddhartha's senses. Long ago it was with awakening. This time with the echo of his despair. Listening more deeply, he emptied himself on the banks of the river and kept listening. Finally, when he could hear all the voices the river contained at once, he heard in it the primal sound that began the universe, the sacred Aum. Letting this sound fill his body and spirit, he slept deeply for the first time in many years as the power of the Aum renewed him. He awakens to a familiar face watching over him. Govinda, not recognizing his former friend, watches over him. Upon awakening, Siddhartha thanks the astonished monk by name. Siddhartha wishes Govinda a peaceful journey and tells him about his own plan to stay by the river and learn all it has to offer. Soon after, he again encounters the ferryman, now a much older man who barely recognizes the once young Samana from decades ago. Giving the ferryman his fine clothes in exchange for a ride, Siddhartha begins his new journey, this time to live in the simple surroundings of the ferryman's hut, listening to the river and ferrying people across. To everyone else, the river is an obstacle on their journey, one that needs a ferryman's help to overcome. But to the pair of silent men who live in the hut along its banks, this river is a teacher, friend, and confidant. Slowly, Siddhartha's silence lets the river fill him more and more, and his soul begins to understand the wisdom in it. The seasons, the passengers, the rise and fall of the water, all hold lessons for those who have ears to hear them. And finally, Siddhartha was ready to listen. At the end of Siddhartha's successful merchant life, one thing is clear. Worldly success, wealth, fine food, and sexual pleasure are also unable to carve a path to true wisdom. Like religion or blind devotion, finding meaning in business success or social admiration is a dead end on the path. In the developing parable, the author is both revealing traditional obstacles to true wisdom while alluding to the dangers of modern society to dull the spirit and crush the soul under layers of consumerism and greed. Ultimately, when Siddhartha's integrity is threatened and his divine spark is dulled, he experiences a powerful dream. In it, Siddhartha finds that the beautiful songbird his lover Kamala keeps is now dead in its cage. The beautiful song is silenced forever. At once, Siddhartha recognizes this bird represents his own soul, and in despair he believes he has killed it through his own indulgence and greed. This realization leads to devastating shame at what he has become. Despair now drives him to leave everything behind again and go out into the wilderness. This journey closes a circle, from awakened Samana heading off to discover himself across the river to the devastated middle-aged man now despairing on its banks. Instead of finding himself, it would seem, he'd lost himself in the world. But it is by the waters of this river that Siddhartha finds hope again, and as if by some miracle, his friend Govinda finds him, not even recognizing his old friend. Govinda and Siddhartha part once again, but this time it is Siddhartha that wishes Govinda a good journey onward while he remains. The recurring cycles of separation and reunion play a crucial role in Siddhartha's journey toward enlightenment, as will be evident in the concluding chapters. By the river in that simple hut along the river, Siddhartha begins to find peace. By the river. Soon, word spreads about the two wise old men. Some pilgrims even stop along the way and share their stories with the willing pair of listeners. The two men, however, spend their time listening to the river and hear within it all the voices of the gods, of humans and their struggles, of nature and its mysteries. Some mornings, the river even seems to laugh at their struggles. Slowly, Siddhartha begins to understand. The river, ever-changing, is always the same. Just like the pampered boy, the Samana, the wealthy merchant, and the simple ferryman are all Siddhartha too. And every incarnation of Siddhartha, every future of Siddhartha, they were all present like the river, ever flowing, yet ever the same. As this awareness grows peace and insight in the former Brahmin, the river brings him closure too. First, Kamala, his former lover, is bitten by a snake along her pilgrimage to Siddhartha. Now a disciple of the great teacher, she and her young son, Siddhartha's child, find their way to the ferryman's hut before she dies. He bids a fond farewell to Kamala and brings her peace in her passing. Now reconnected with his own pampered Brahmin child, Siddhartha struggles to parent his defiant boy in such humble surroundings. When his son, too, expresses a strong desire to leave and find his own way, Siddhartha attempts to stop him. He soon realizes he has now exchanged places with his own father, who tried to keep young Siddhartha from departing many years ago. In letting him go, Siddhartha breaks the cycle. In releasing this final struggle, he finds peace with his past. Sensing that Siddhartha is now ready, his humble ferryman departs too. He had patiently waited for Siddhartha's final awakening before dying. Now alone again at the river, the elderly monk Govinda once again wanders past Siddhartha, once again not recognizing his old friend. Sensing his great peace, Govinda asks Siddhartha for his teaching. Humbly, Siddhartha explains that he has learned from the river that time is the illusion, not the world, and that all things in nature and the world have wisdom to impart and have value, that all things resound with the sacred Aum. Baffled by his friend's words, Govinda nonetheless stoops to kiss his friend in thanks. In this moment, Govinda sees all the past incarnations of Siddhartha, all the faces Siddhartha has worn, and all the paths he has walked. Yet still, here is the shining face of his friend. Feeling this awareness pierce his heart like an arrow, he saw in his friend's face the exalted one, the Buddha. In it, every revelation he had sought, every teaching he had ever heard. With this revelation, Govinda wept. In his final journey inward, Siddhartha must face the ultimate truth, himself. Journeying back to the riverbank where he first awakened, Siddhartha once again finds his source. He had fasted, prayed, and waited for years to conquer his flesh. Then spent decades indulging in every pleasure the flesh could offer, only to end up farther away from himself. But thus far he has rejected the traditional path of a Brahmin, embraced the ascetic way of the holy man, and rejected spiritual teachings as well as the pampered indulgences of wealth and sex. All of these are traps set by society, waiting to ensnare the true seeker on the road to wisdom. Siddhartha must forget and remember himself again and again to understand the lesson. To reach peace, he must ultimately confront his own past and the pain he caused others by striking out in his own. The river is gracious and brings his loved ones back to him for resolution. The final gift is particularly sweet when Siddhartha once again meets his old friend Govinda, who he had so long ago set out on the monk's path to Buddhahood. In this encounter, Siddhartha imparts his final lessons and shares the gift of his wisdom eagerly with his friend, stating openly that wisdom becomes foolish when spoken and can only be grasped without words through experience. It is in his shining smile that Siddhartha finally reveals himself to his friend as an enlightened one. For Govinda, seeing this in the face he loved most dearly in all the world, the experience brings him the enlightenment he has so longed for in a poetic moment of closure and joy. In this, the author resounds the transformative power of love as the ultimate truth. Final words. In this summary to Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, you've learned that this beloved classic novel explores profound wisdom, uncommunicable through words, via the story of a seeker who refuses to compromise. Embracing various paths from a privileged child to a holy man, from a rich merchant to a humble ferryman, Siddhartha reaches for a direct experience of reality and the divine. This poetic narrative subtly critiques contemporary Western religion and capitalism, highlighting the emptiness of life spent chasing externalities. However, it suggests that through patience, compassion, and courage, all things, even enlightenment, are attainable. Thanks for being part of our insightful voyage. If our summary piqued your interest, we encourage you to dive into the complete book for a deeper understanding. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more content if you're new here, and share it with others who might find it valuable. Keep on reading, discovering, and advancing until our next adventure.